Hi, everybody. Very, very excited to have everybody with us today for another entry in Pathways to Healing, insights from global health leaders. And today we have Dudley Chewning, who is a licensed marriage family therapist. And Dudley is in Louisiana, and he is an IASIS practitioner and has been with us for many years. He is also trauma informed as a therapist as well and certified in that arena. Dudley, I'm very happy that you could be with us today.
Well, thank you, Barry. Thank you for the invite. We got a lot of work to do and a lot of people that need our help.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I guess to start, because I'm really excited that having your background and in the world that we're in today, as you said, with so much work to do and so many people that are suffering with trauma from war, cult abuse, sexual abuse, the loss of loved ones, it goes on and on. And I would love to learn a little bit more. First, how did you get interested? What brought you to get interested in the arena of trauma? And tell folks a little bit about your background, what got you involved in it, and then, if you would, how it led you through to the certification that you received as a trauma-informed therapist as well. And then I've got some other questions as we go.
Okay, sure. Let me give you a little of my background. I was a former combat pilot. I flew in Vietnam, so that begins to tell people how old I am, which is no problem. But flying in combat, a combat PTSD is a little different from other forms of PTSD. You're dealing with death and killing and near death. So those things are awful powerful to the body when it comes to PTSD. Also, during national disasters, I was the site mental health director when Rita and the other hurricanes hit the coast of Louisiana, and we had 2,500 evacuees inside our Coliseum. So I was the mental health director there. And this is prior to ISIS. This was just like insight therapy. But the unique thing that I had, my problem people were my staff.
Mhm.
Staff was contaminated by the people that were evacuated into our site. They were in a trance mode, basically. And our staff just didn't know how to take it. I had to excuse two psychiatrists, um, several LPCs, a chaplain, a nun, and some plain civilians that didn't have any background training in it because they just didn't know how to accept or deal with a person that was in a trauma from a recent event. So we learned a lot about trauma and how it impacts a community as well as how it impacts an individual.
May I interject a quick question just to
Yeah.
clarify? Did you say that you were the head of the trauma information, or what was your role? And was it during Rita and Katrina?
Correct. Yeah. Well, my role, I was the mental health director. I was in charge of all the mental health staff that we had that was
Got it.
treating those 2,500 evacuees.
Understood. Understood.
And I
And you
also
trained, and you
now,
trained
over
all
my
these
years,
individuals that you were mentioning a moment ago. You gave them the training that they needed to give that support.
no, I really didn't have time to give the training. I didn't have the knowledge either to give them the training. I was just a basic therapist trying to help and organize the staff to deal with the evacuees. So I didn't near have the background that I had now, but
Got it.
there are other agencies that are called the Medical Reserve Corps. They're all over the nation. And
Okay.
that's a group of volunteer doctors that will assist during a national disaster. So I have been trained and I'm the mental health director for Northwest Louisiana when it comes to the Medical Reserve Corps.
Okay. I understand. And so
And
tell us how have you taken that training and what have you added on to that training? And tell us more about the actual training that you went through and what you've learned and how it has better prepared you to work with and lead trauma events more effectively.
okay, yeah. Well, being in the combat and being in near-death experiences myself, trauma was there, so I understood what it does, but I didn't understand how it treated the body until I got some more trauma training from Bessel van der Kolk, Alexander McFarland, Peter Levine, and Stephen Porges. Those people I classify as the expert on trauma. So I read books and I looked at a lot of videos on YouTube from Stephen Porges, and they had a national conference. Well, this is probably about 10 years ago, where Kolk, Levine, Porges, and McFarland were all there, and they gave us, it was about a 2-day training seminar just on PTSD. So that gave me the knowledge background. So I started moving that way because I started treating veterans. I had a tie with them. So I advertised and started working with the VA, and I got on board as a provider for the VA. And inside the VA, they have a program that's called community care. And community care is when the VA outsources to the public when they don't have enough staff to cover the clientele or the patients that the VA has. So
I'm very familiar with the community care network.
lucky for me, I just talked to them, filled out the paperwork, and they needed somebody. So I got lucky there and then became a provider for community care, and probably half of my load is veterans that are suffering from PTSD. So the background training, I had one client that I was using insight therapy on, prolonged exposure therapy. She had all kind of medical problems. She wound up going to Tyler after I was working with her, to Dr. Brown, the psychologist. And she called me up and said, Dudley, come over to Tyler, Texas, and look at this machine. So I went over there and I got introduced to this IASIS machine. So then once I decided to buy that, that's when I contacted you to further my tools, I would say, to work with people that have trauma specifically. That was my focus. So then I incorporated IASIS, and that ties into the vagal or the polyvagal theory, which is Stephen Porges's theory. And he has a book on it, but he has a lot of other training that you can get. And it just talks all about the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve and trauma is not usually taught in college. Mm-hmm. So if you get a degree, master's or a doctorate, there's a good chance you won't get any trauma training. Mm-hmm. Now, in the state of Louisiana, we have an LSU in Shreveport. They don't teach trauma training. Mm-hmm. And I found one in South Louisiana in Lafayette, University of LSU down there. They spend a whole semester on just the polyvagal theory.
Wow.
And I believe that is that important. It just takes you through the anatomy of the vagus nerve and all of the symptoms that a malfunctioning vagus nerve causes people to have. So it's like the foundation of trauma. You just need to know the polyvagal theory. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, and my training in hypnosis, my training in insight therapies, like prolonged exposure, which is like EMDR without the eye movement, has led me into understanding why people have the symptoms. And I think Dr. Alexander McFarland, which we don't have a whole lot of literature on him, But he, according to Vanderkolk, is the world expert on PTSD.
Mhm.
And the reason is he worked with PTSD as the Australians went into Vietnam, and he does studies, longitudinal studies. And with that knowledge he gets from those studies, he must be a government psychiatrist or something. He has built his information on exactly what trauma does to the mental state, and even worse, what it does to the body state. And he classifies PTSD, we call it that. He calls it trauma memory. And I like the word trauma memory better than PTSD. But he says it is a systemic disease. And why he says is that it gets into when you're traumatized, things happen to the body. And when he means body, it goes into the brainstem, and the brainstem is talking to the vagus nervous system. That is the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So what he is saying is it's a systemic disease, and we haven't looked at it that way. But it is because it causes so many body malfunctioning, heart problems, gut problems. All your organs are interacting with the vagus nervous system. So when things are out of sync with the vagus nervous system, you have all kinds of organ problems. And if you go to Vincent Folletti, he was an MD that did the big study on the ACE survey. And people need to utilize the ACE survey, our practitioners do. I think there's still a form located on the IASIS site, but it's a 10 question survey. It's called the ACE survey. And Vincent Folletti was working on a weight loss program for people that were obese over 450 pounds. So they did a big reduction on weight, and they got people under 300 pounds during this study. Then post-study, they had to see where these people were after the big experiment. Well, they found out a lot of people gained weight back too fast and abnormally fast. So they had to go do another study, and that's where he came up with the ACE study. And what they found out was that children or adults that were children that were abused as children had a major problem in life. And the extent that he says is if you score at, say, 6 or higher on this 10 questionnaire survey, you can lose 20 years of your life. So that really validates what McFarland is saying. It's a systemic disease, and it just erodes the body. The adrenaline and the cortisol that is secreted from the commands from the brainstem become toxic over time. So the more you load it down with adrenaline or cortisol, you get body damage and you get central nervous system wear and tear. And that's the value of when you have your central nervous system with wear and tear. He calls that allostatic loading. It's just with time, your body's just going to wear out too fast.
Quick question. To be clear for those who are listening, the 10 question little questionnaire is called the ACE study. Is that correct?
It's a survey, and you got it on your website. You did
Right.
have
It's on the private, sir. It's on the private website. It's not on the public side. So if someone wants to look it up, how do you spell that?
ACE, just like ACE.
Okay, so it's ACE survey, and the answer to those questions will be helpful because if we answer 6 or more questions on the ACE survey affirmatively, it is in a good indicator that an individual may be losing years of their life because of the trauma and the body and the somatic memory that they hold on a cellular level in their body.
That's correct. That's correct.
I see. I see. And
So,
do you use that still with your patients?
I do it with everybody. If the mailman walked in, I'd give him an ACE survey just so I would know what's going on. It's when I'm doing an assessment on anyone that I'm seeing now for ISIS treatment prior to starting the treatment, I give them a day survey, and I give it to them for two reasons. A survey, they can answer it a little more honestly than talking to them, because if you start talking to them about trauma, there's a good chance you're going to re-traumatize. You're going to cause adrenaline to flow. And when that flows, their thinking gets all messed up. So that little 10-question survey, they can answer it fairly quick. I can look at it and I know just about all I need to know, and I don't have to talk about their trauma.
I see.
But I add to that, and I said, once I got their childhood trauma, which is from pre-birth, and your brain doesn't fully develop till you're about 21 or 22. So when you become an adult, all I want to know from my IASIS client to be is how many adult trauma events you have suffered. And once they tell me more than 3 or 4, now we have multiple trauma events. Right? Your worst case for trauma is you have an adult that had childhood trauma, never got over it. Now they're an adult. They might have been in combat. They might have been a first responder, or they might have been a person that just had a lot of bad luck. They've had more than one trauma event, and more than 4 is too many, or more than 1 is too many. But Alexander McFarland states trauma events are cumulative. Just like ISIS is cumulative, the more you treat them, the better it gets. Well, trauma acts in reverse. The more trauma you get, the worse the next one is going to impact you. So it's the reverse of what ISIS does. But ISIS is cumulative, and trauma events are cumulative. And the big bear, the big monster is that childhood trauma. If they don't get that filtered out and they're an adult, they're more susceptible to the impact of a new trauma event. And then another trauma event comes, another trauma event, you're really stacked up, and your system, your central nervous system, your body is just jammed with too much adrenaline. And Vincent Folletti tells us that most doctors are treating a symptom and they're not treating the cause of the symptom. And he says most of the causes of the symptoms are trauma. But doctors aren't trained in that, and therapists aren't trained in that. So if you can go to the root of the problem, you're going to help knock out those symptoms and keep those symptoms from coming back. So it's the training I received, the books I've looked at, and the YouTube videos I looked at have given me all that background. And so I utilize that as ISIS comes on board with a person, that ISIS can do a lot of things that talk therapy can't do. And it's a lot better than talk therapy, because talk therapy, if you don't use it right, can be detrimental to trauma.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? I know that you've mentioned it and what that one gentleman has said. And of course, having had the privilege of training with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, for whom the stages of grieving have been taught for several years in her emotional release process, it was her core belief that for individuals to be able to move through early life wounding, which held the key to later life wounding, in terms of being able to really heal the whole gamut, the whole sort of chain, if you will, from the beginning of life, what could happen at 3 months in the womb, in the 3rd trimester, all the way through today, where an individual is in their life. But I would love for you to speak more to that, because I remember when a very dear therapist friend of mine, Tom Paris, at one point said he was concerned about different forms of therapy that were supposedly desensitizing, that actually he believed were re-traumatizing. And you kind of touched on that. I'd love for you to speak more to that, and also share with folks a little bit more about the specific training that you went through and your certification that you have as a trauma-informed therapist? You with me? Looks like you're frozen there. Dudley Chewning. Can you hear me, sir? Dudley? Sorry, folks. It looks like we're having
Poor trauma, what
technical
they're
issues here
successful.
with Dudley's system. Dudley is now back with us, so please excuse the last couple of minutes that we've been waiting for his system to kind of come back online. Dudley,
Okay.
I don't know if you heard my last request.
Yeah, I think I did. Is that where did I get my training? And that training was basically from a copy of the International PTSD conference held and hosted by Bessel van der Kolk, in which we had Porges, Alexander McFarland, and several other experts, and their focus was just working trauma. So that's where I got my foundation. Then I went to the books and started studying more. Then I incorporated IASIS, and IASIS is unique. IASIS can talk to the body without verbal language. That's basically what it's doing. It's detoxifying, cleaning out, which is what mental health thinks they're doing. But IASIS has a unique way of doing it. We're working with frequencies to work with those frequencies that are in the brain. And those basic 5 frequencies in the brain are talking to each other and coordinating things.
Mhm.
And so I think when you're saying we need to bathe the brain, that's really, really super important, because different parts of the brain have to coordinate with other parts of the brain to get things done. So bathing the brain is a good way to explain it, and something that's needed, because you just got to clean out those neural pathways
Mhm.
so that the brain is functional and working as a true brain needs to be.
Understood.
So
Understood. Yeah. And then going back to the prior question that you had mentioned about the danger of wanting to do desensitization type therapeutic approaches, insight, et cetera. And again, we don't want to say a disparaging thing about anybody or anything or any approach. However, what we do want to make sure of is that we're not making it worse. We're not re-traumatizing. And can you speak to that? And what have you found to be re-traumatizing as a therapist? What do you tend to stay away from as opposed to utilize? And what do you recommend to other therapists to consider? And because I know so many people are working with EMDR and different therapies like emotional freedom technique, brain spotting. There are many different things that people are working with, but what are the ones that people should give a little more thought to, or perhaps a little bit more refined training? Because I'm not sure that I really believe personally that there's a good, bad, right, or wrong approach. Rather, a helpful, skillful, less helpful, skillful approach. And so I'm wondering, which of those do you find might need a little bit more refined training so that folks are using it in a way where it's not re-traumatizing? And what have you found to be most helpful in your medicine bag in terms of working therapeutically in
yeah, if I went to that
advice?
bag, I would probably go to the emotional freedom techniques. That's basically called tapping. And tapping is tapping on certain locations on the head that are similar to acupuncture and acupressure, and also in a way similar to the chocolate chip donut or cookie that we use. So that's basically called tapping. And
If I could
but
interject real quick, hold that thought. So what Dudley's talking about, folks, we in our work with IASIS, we look at the head, and as you know, different locations that are on the head that may represent the international 10-20 site pairs, and that's what Dudley was referring to. I'm sorry, Dudley, go ahead.
No, that's correct. That's a better way of saying it. And so the tapping is important because acupuncture and acupressure has told us it's important. So these locations are doing something that we have found out through time help. And there probably are some new ones out there also. I know for ISIS and what you have done, Barry, you have also led us to the trapeze and to the vagus point, which are not on the chart, which need to be somewhere. I guess on the body chart, we need to put those guys.
Yeah.
But the body just seems to have meridians and is reacting in different ways to different things. But I talk to my clients about vagal exercises, and this comes out of Porges. Mm-hmm. And emotional freedom is one of those exercises. But I put those on my YouTube site. You just type in my name and you can go to the vagal exercises. Mm-hmm. And I have my ISIS clients to do those when they're not in treatment, do them at home. That's the tapping, the deep breathing, taking a quick cold shower, anything that vibrates the throat, singing, coughing, crying, all those things vibrate the throat. And if you notice, if you've ever seen someone crying, they cry and all of a sudden, bang, it quits. Well, what has happened is that crying has vibrated the vagus nerve in both sides of the neck and retoned it. And as soon as the vagus nerve is back in tune, that energy to cry it just evaporates. So those things are important. So I task my clients to use those. So emotional freedom technique was mainly used, and they had a big study on that over in Rwanda when they had genocide where they lost 1 million people in 100 days. So a lot of the children witnessed their siblings and parents being killed and slaughtered. So that was extreme trauma. So they sent psychologists over there and they just did tapping and they put it to music. And music is a good way for the body to relax, listening to certain frequencies in music around 425 hertz. That's just soothing to the body and soothing to the brain. So there are other techniques, and I really use those vagal techniques, but that ties into Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory that works specifically on the vagus nerve. So all those things tie in pretty quick, and you understand what Folletti is saying, you understand what Alexander McFarland is saying, because they're all talking about the same stuff. They're really talking about the central nervous system. And therapeutic people are missing out on that, but MDs are missing out on it too, because they don't look at trauma as the source of all these diseases and problems that we're having. So it's you just kind of see it from that standpoint. And answering your question is tapping, but any of the exercises, vagal exercises that Stephen Porges talks about, your clients should be doing it, and they can do them on their own. You don't have to sit in your clinic time and walk them through that. And then that is an adjunct to helping you when it comes to ISIS. They can lower their anxiety, but it won't get lowered as quick as ISIS can lower it. But it gives them something to do at home, and because life is just going to give you stressful events. Mm-hmm. And stressful events can also lead to reactivation of the trauma. So you just have to watch out. So I guess therapeutic talk therapies can be good, but you just have to be careful because they can wind up exciting the brainstem, and the brainstem then kicks off adrenaline, then your vagus nerve system gets out of tone real quick. So that's the quickest way I can answer that question, which is a big question. Whatever therapeutic interventions are good. Well, there are some good ones, but I would focus just on the vagal ones. first.
And in terms of your training with and studying Dr. Stephen Porges and his polyvagal theory, which is very widespread and known as a concept. In your own words, would you break it down? And for the sake of folks that may not have the same knowledge about Steve Porges, Dr. Porges, or his polyvagal theory, would you explain the different elements of his theory and how he arrived at it, and maybe mention a thing or two about what has made the greatest impact on you relative to his teaching?
Uh, he stumbled on it working with different studies. He was a professor of psychiatry at some university up in the Northeast. He's a trained psychologist, but through his studies of the vagus nerve, he just found out a lot of information about it. So he had a lot of medical background giving him the information that needs to be accomplished when it comes to therapy. So that is kind of that stuff. What was your question inside your question there?
Well, so, mostly what I'd like to know is in terms of polyvagal theory, I know that Dr. Porges talks about certain what he calls dorsal vagal sort of situations. And would you go into what those are and what they mean?
Oh, okay. Yeah, the different terminology has you got the dorsal and ventral vagus nerve. And you also have the right-sided vagus nerve, which is on the right side of your neck, and the left side vagus nerve is on the left side. These are cranial nerves. They're a pair of cranial nerves that sit on top of the brain. They cross the brain, so they're back up to each other. Then they come out on the other side, and one of them feeds above the diaphragm. Okay, so it's working, and they're myelinated vagus nerves. That means they're super insulated, and they work faster than thought. So it's controlling your heart and your lungs. The other vagus nerve will run below the diaphragm, and it interacts with all the organs down there, such as your digestive system and all those organs in your trunk. That information is sent back up to the brain for the brain to calibrate and decide what it needs to do with the heart and lungs. So it's a coordinated system, and it's just important that we understand some of his terminology. Let me give you a metaphor for it. You take the accelerator in a car, and as you push down on the accelerator, you're giving gas to the engine. Well, in trauma, what's happening, you give adrenaline to the brain. Okay. And so as you push down, you're giving excitement to the body. And if you want to play sports and you're in coordinated sports, the positive thing of the sympathetic nervous system is I can play sports. I can catch a ball, throw a ball, run, think, and do all the things I need to do. Now, so that's the normal sympathetic nervous system activity. Now, when you're in the emergency mode with trauma, your sympathetic nervous system does something different. It's dumping adrenaline as your gas. Okay, now your coordinated activity, if they're rote memory, you can go into the flight or fight stage. Okay, so that's the sympathetic nervous system. But if you bring your foot on before, when you have an emergency situation, you're floorboarding the accelerator to get you out of trouble. And that's basically you're dumping more adrenaline into your brain, and that's the fight or flight mode. Okay. So we switch over to the vagus nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. Mm-hmm. And what that is, if you take your foot off of the accelerator, there's a spring in the accelerator. It's moving the accelerator back. So it's withdrawing those forces that are causing flight or fight. So it's bringing you back into rest and sleep. So the parasympathetic nervous system is important. if it's working right, you're going to get good sleep. Your body's going to recover. You're going to get good rest.
Dudley, we
Your
lost you again.
sympathetic nervous
Oh, there you
system.
go. Now you're back. Okay. We lost the last
Okay.
30 seconds.
Okay. I was talking about your sympathetic nervous system has a good part and a bad part to it. The good part is it gives you the skills to play and exercise. The emergency position of that is if you get adrenaline, you go into flight or fight. And that's all the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is that other side. When you're coming off the accelerator, the parasympathetic nervous system is bringing you out of that energy state that allows you to flight or fight, or it allows you to be coordinated. So the parasympathetic nervous system draws you back into being able to sleep, being able to recover from exercises and activities, and giving you rest, giving your body rest.
Mm-hmm.
So its emergency state is if you're in a fight or flight mode, but you cannot fight and you cannot flee, then the parasympathetic system grabs you and says, come back in here. I'm going to make you faint. Then when you faint, your brain system is shutting down. Then it gets back into a different mode after you faint.
Mm-hmm.
And so the parasympathetic system is kind of on the opposite side of the accelerator, bringing you back. Now, when you hit the brakes, that's an emergency code for the parasympathetic nervous system to withdraw and faint, so that your body just has to do that because it's a blasted scare.
Got it.
So Porges has the first thing that goes wrong when you're traumatized is called social disengagement. That means I withdraw from social activity because I'm traumatized, and the brainstem is now in control. And he doesn't give a hoot about anybody else. He wants you safe. His job is to save you and the body. So the brainstem is saying, stay away from people. Don't trust people. Don't socialize with them. Stay away from them. And that switch we don't talk a whole lot about, but once it's triggered into the negative, it's sending code back into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic to treat those things. So that's the first thing. Now, when you enter, say you're startled, the next two steps are what Porges says. The first one is called danger. And when you sense danger, you can sense danger through the nose, through the ears and frequencies, through just body impact. Any of your senses can cause you to go into trauma based on what the brainstem has them with. So if you have a smell that is tied to danger, then you're going to remember that. And when I say you're going to remember that, your brainstem is going to remember it, and not your frontal cortex. Okay. So what we're really treating a lot with IASIS is the brain stem. We've got to get to the brain stem. So I think BZ is one of the spots we need to focus on a little more. But it's more of a brainstem thing. So the brainstem has taken control during emergencies. If you remember the disciple Stephen in the Bible, he was fixing to get stoned to death. And in the Bible, it says he fell asleep. Okay. What's the difference between falling asleep and fainting? He probably more likely fainted. They just didn't know what the word was at the time. But he was at a life threat condition. If you think you're going to die, you feel like you're going to die, or you want to die, then the body does different things. Okay. So the first case is life threat, and life threat really sends out these large pulses of trauma to the body and the brainstem, the vagus nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic nervous system. Those guys are all tied together, controlling your body and your symptoms. So,
got it.
So that's kind of the quick and dirt of how the polyvagal theory controls the body via the brain stem and not the frontal cortex.
And so can you also speak to, I know that I have heard Amy Apigian, who is also a dear friend and trauma specialist, and she's spoken about dorsal vagal shutdown and dorsal vagal freeze. Could you speak to what those are in brief?
Yeah, I don't think that terminology is not the terminology I would use. You have the polyvagal theory we're talking about, dorsal or ventral, whichever vagus nerve they're talking about. You have the parasympathetic nervous system causing you to withdraw, and the worst case is you pass out or faint. Okay, so that's what they may call a freeze. A freeze is not a term that Porges uses. He uses withdrawal and shut down, and it doesn't even really say the word fainting, but it looks like fainting.
I see.
And so the sympathetic part is this high anxiety. You see people with anxiety, we treat anxiety. That's just the sympathetic nervous system running with adrenaline, and that adrenaline is just causing excitement.
Got it. So one last question, because I know that you've got to move on to patients that you need to see today, and that is relative to the one of the pairs that we use in IASIS, which is the vagus nerve pair. What has been your experience of working with that? Have you found it to be helpful? And why do you think that it's helpful, if so?
Well, yes, and I do use it more, and I thank you for bringing it up. The vagus nerve and those 2 points are helping that vagus nerve, correct, stay or get toned up. It's just like coughing or sneezing, vibrating the throat, singing, yodeling, all those things. They will help that vagus nerve get toned up. And the ISIS, I think, is basically doing that same thing. So I use it more and more than I ever have used, and I think it's a good pair setting to use when you're working with a trauma person that just is stuck. You're not getting anywhere. I would definitely go to the vagus nerve. In fact, I go to the vagus nerve even earlier than that now, and I think it's just an important point that we do use with our leads to help that vagus nerve come out of or go back into tone. It's important.
And finally, if you knew that someone was really needing to work on some early wounding, maybe they had early abuse, they were hit, or there was sexual abuse, or a major loss or trauma that they lived through, and they still have it in their body, that body memory. If someone is trying to find a quote trauma informed unquote therapist, how can a person find a trauma informed therapist or specialist? What's the best? Is there a website that you know of for that resource?
No, you can get trauma training from different people. I just got it and certified as a CCTP. That's just a clinical certified trauma professional. Just look for their certifications. But to tell you the truth, if our ISIS practitioners would study the polyvagal theory, I would call them trauma informed.
I see. Very good. Very good. Yeah. And of course, it took me until I had done 2,000 sessions with the vagus nerve pair. I wouldn't even talk about it, even after studying it and learning quite a bit about Stephen Porges and polyvagal theory. But I definitely recommend that book, Polyvagal Theory by Dr. Stephen Porges. And gosh, Dudley, I cannot thank you enough for coming on and for sharing with folks, for Healing Pathways, because we need to bring this knowledge forward. You've spent a lifetime working to learn this information and to bring it to your patients. I know that you've worked hard also bringing IASIS to police and to fire rescue. And, and I know that sometimes even when we do that, there is sometimes a little bit of pushback. People get busy in their lives, but I want to thank you for the trust in me and in IASIS, and for sharing it with your patients, and with the world by being here today and helping to bring your knowledge, your information out there. If you're a therapist, if you have not read Polyvagal Theory, I highly recommend it. And I will definitely do all I can to bring more specialists on who can speak more and inform more about these. But Dudley Chewning, licensed marriage family therapist, former fighter pilot in Vietnam. I thank you for your incredible service, for your friendship, and being a member of our IASIS family, and for coming on today. Thank you, and keep doing the great work that you're doing in the world.
Well, thank you, Barry. And we just got to get the word out. ISIS and trauma. It's one of the words that Dr. Alexander McFarland says is all psychopathology is caused by trauma.
Mm.
And that took me a whole lot to swallow and digest that. But I'm proving it every day that trauma is the root of a ton of medical problems.
Yeah, a ton, if not all, because
Right.
I don't buy that genetics kill. I don't buy that disease kills. I understand that it may be part of the road on the way to a person's demise. I think stress and trauma are the culprit. And IASIS is one of many tools, one helpful spoke on the wheel to assist people to unravel that stress and trauma train back to that brainstem and to the memory that's held in the body. And thank you for illuminating the way for me and for other practitioners, therapists, doctors who can hear and learn from you and benefit greatly. I did put it up on the screen, but I'll put it up one more time, folks. Dudley Chewning, LMFT. It's on the screen now. You can take a look at that, write it down. You can learn more about Dudley. You can go onto his YouTube channel, see more of his exercises, vagal nerve exercises. Again, Dudley Chewning, thank you again so much for being with us. Take great care, and I will look forward to talking with you soon.